Someone on YouTube suggested that I make a video comparing my views on identity politics to that of a conservative, and he suggested the video Why Social Justice is Cancer, Identity Politics, Equality, and Marxism from Roaming Millennial. So we're going to compare why I hate identity politics and then play her term on identity politics and look at why she hates identity politics, and we're going to see where we agree and where we disagree. I actually think that we're probably going to agree on most of this, but I know where this is going to go once we get into the Marxism part. But let's cut to her, then we'll go back to me and back and forth, and hopefully this will be fun, and maybe some people watch her will watch me, and then they'll get really angry at me, and then they can write a bunch of angry comments about me and how I'm an evil communist, and I should, I don't know, go to jail or be deported because I hate America. Maybe I can get some of that also. Anyway, let's just cut to her right now.
So basically, social justice describes the idea that if you are white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual, and from the West, you are privileged and an active oppressor of people who are not in those groups.
Yeah, I can't disagree with this. This social justice phenomenon is about scapegoating white men for all the problems in society and claiming that if we just attack white men and take away their privilege and give their shit to other people, everything else is somehow going to be solved.
And that kind of brings us to the first issue I have with this ideology, that it focuses on group identity instead of individualism. Whether it's feminists complaining that women on average don't earn as much as men, or race advocates complaining that there aren't enough people of color visible in the media, all social justice initiatives are the same. They don't focus on who you are, they focus on what you are.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. Many of these social justice warriors cannot look at anyone as an individual. Everyone has to have their identity that they walk around with, and everyone is interpreted in terms of their identity, and those social problems have to be reduced down to identity politics, and this identity against that identity, and taking away privilege from one identity and giving it to another, and there are no individuals. Yeah, that's just the way this social justice warrior phenomena is.
While Martin Luther King made the audacious statement that he had a dream, that his 4 little children would one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, modern-day social justice activists have kind of taken the exact opposite approach. You see, through the lens of social justice, the world is not made up of individuals with their own skills and faults and their own backstories and their own struggles that are specific to their situations. Instead, society is made up of distinct groups, and in every instance, one group is the oppressor and another group is the oppressed. Men oppress women, straight people oppress gay people, cisgendered people oppress trans people, white people oppress non-white people, able-bodied people oppress disabled people, native populations oppress immigrants. So if you are a black woman who is transgender, disabled, and gay, you've essentially won the oppression lottery. Essentially, this focus that social justice has on labels means that it lends itself extremely well to identity politics. Whether it's on the left or on the right, I am just not a fan of identity politics. Identity politics try to tell us that different groups have different interests, which I just don't think is true.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. She's completely correct. And what identity politics has done to the left is it's taken something that was once about challenging capitalism and challenging this ownership class issue and saying, well, we're not going to question that anymore. We're just going to focus on the individual needs of all of these different groups. It's to the point where it's an apolitical movement. It's an economic movement. There is no political or economic theory in it whatsoever. And I think whether you're coming at this from a true conservative perspective or a true radical leftist perspective like me, we can only look at identity politics as a void. There is nothing there to really understand reality except people clamoring that different groups have different needs, when the fact is that we're all humans on planet Earth and we all need to eat, we all need water, we all need a system that's designed to take care of us.
I think it's safe to say that all people, no matter who they are, want equality, liberty, and opportunities for themselves. That doesn't change based on someone's skin color or genitals. And most importantly and worryingly, identity politics also allow for the belief that groups are responsible for the actions of individuals within those groups. This is where we get the ideas in social justice that all white people are responsible for slavery, even though no one in the West alive today who is white has owned a slave, or that all straight people are responsible for marginalizing gay people. Whether they actually do or don't as individuals is irrelevant. I am not a fan of being blamed for actions that aren't my own, nor am I a fan of people assuming my interests based on the way that I look. So no, I'm really not into this whole group label thing.
Yeah, she's completely correct. As a white man, the only thing this social justice warrior phenomenon has to offer me is that I should apologize for being white, and I have accusations that I am a racist, I'm a homophobe, I'm a sexist, I'm all these things because I'm a white man, and it's all my fault. And I have to be viewed as a white man. I'm not an individual. I can't try to not be racist. I'm a racist. I might as well just apologize for it, and blah, 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 blah. And the response you're going to get from white people is, fuck you, I'm not going to deal with this. And really, the fact that you have a small, tiny amount of white people who want to go and apologize for being white, it doesn't mean anything. You're not getting anywhere with this. It's a stupid ideology. White people see it's a stupid ideology. It's not going to lead them anywhere, and that's why this doesn't really get anywhere. Except it's divisive.
And actually, this leads us to my second issue with social justice, which is that it focuses on justice and not equality. Now, as we get into this, I want to be perfectly clear that I am not against the concept of justice. I think our justice system is extremely important for our society to function.
Justice. Justice is a really stupid concept, but people want to believe in it. I don't believe in justice. I think that you can take the word justice and replace it with punishment, and you're going to get to the exact same thing. And I don't think punishment is important. Punishment creates more of the problems that led to having people to punish to begin with. Should get rid of punishment altogether. Get rid of the idea of justice. There is no thing as justice in the world. The only thing that there is reality. The only thing that there is what's out there. And trying to force the world into your idea of, moral rights and wrong by delving out punishments against people is really fucking stupid. The only thing out there is reality. And when we have aberrant behavior, the only rational thing to do is to look at what are the causes of aberrant behavior from a public health perspective and move towards correcting that. So if you get people who are rapists and murderers and all that, oh yeah, well, you might want to remove them from society in a way because they're causing harm and you don't want that to continue. But you don't fix the problem through punishment. Ultimately, you fix the problem by looking at society and saying, why do we have these problems to begin with? Why did our society create this? Ultimately, I don't believe that we have free will. I didn't have a free will to choose that I was going to be born in Brooklyn in 1976. I didn't have free will to choose that I'm a white person. I didn't have free will to choose my parents. I didn't have free will to choose the abuse that I went under as a child for 11 years. So I don't know where this comes from. I don't have the free will to be fucked up from that. I don't have the free will to say I don't want to be in a capitalist society. We don't have a world of free will. We have a world where the environment forms and shapes us into the people who we are. And sure, there are individual factors, and I don't think we should go so far with the environmental factors as to throw out the idea of individuality, which is something which I do think that can happen when it comes to, I guess, certain people in the world of resource-based economy discussion. But the idea that you correct social problems through the mechanism of punishment and supposed justice, is bullshit. Ultimately, justice isn't just about punishment, but justice is a way for the system to defend its faults without blaming itself. So our system created this murderer. Instead of blaming the system itself, looking into what we did as a society as a whole, we will just blame and delve out punishment. It's just so fucking stupid. But I don't know if there's a way to get that across to conservatives who seem to be obsessed with punishment, especially in the United States. I think we have a culture which almost has like this punishment fetish almost. I really hate it. It's fucking disgusting. Fuck justice. Fuck punishment. Fucking stupid.
However, when the concept of justice is applied to group identities, it can be, as the social justice warriors like to say, problematic. So broadly and conceptually defined, justice has to do with what is just or fair, which doesn't sound like a bad thing. But practically, when we talk about justice, we're talking about the assignment of rewards and punishments. And this concept of rewards and punishments is exactly what we see in many, if not most, social justice initiatives. For instance, affirmative action rewards minority members, and because they don't qualify for it, punishes majority members. Diversity initiatives reward those who are diverse while overlooking those who aren't. aren't. Any social justice program that is designed to benefit groups like women or the LGBT plus community, by definition, excludes people who aren't part of those groups. And while those of us who aren't part of social justice ideology might think it really wrong to favor and therefore disfavor certain people based on their gender, sexuality, and race, in the social justice mindset, these rewards and punishments are completely justified because they believe that society rewards and punishes people anyway based on them belonging to oppressed or oppressing groups. If that makes sense. Like, for example, a social justice warrior might think it completely necessary to give a job to a black guy instead of a white guy, even though their qualifications might be the same, because in his mind, the black person has now probably been punished so much by society that he is in fact owed a reward. Conversely, the white person has probably enjoyed so many privileges throughout their lives that this one punishment of not getting the job doesn't even begin to correct the situation. Additionally, because historically in the United States, white people as a group have oppressed black people as a group, it stands to reason that now white people as a group must pay reparations and reward black people as a group for their long-standing suffering. And no, I'm not making this up. This is actually what goes on in the minds of social justice warriors. But the problem with this is that on a societal level, justice, i.e. rewards and punishments, can never lead to equality. These are two opposing ideas. Either people are equal and we treat them the same way regardless of their skin color, orientation, or gender, or we try to hold groups accountable for wrongs they have committed in the past. Trying to artificially prop up members of the minority group while artificially pushing down members of the majority group goes completely against the concept of equality.
It's important to be very nuanced in our understanding of the world and look at things from a systemic perspective. With a very narrow point of view, things such as affirmative action are completely negative and will not lead to equality and will not solve problems. And I think if you really step back and you look at what these notions of enforcing equality are, is yet you're not going to get equality by oppressing one group and making them give their privilege to someone else. That's not going to lead to anything, and she's correct. The problem with identity politics is it doesn't have an economic philosophy, it doesn't have a political philosophy, there's nothing to do except to demand that these different groups have enforced equality. Trying to think with some nuance, I think we should be able to understand that considering the situation of black people in the United States, going all the way back from slavery to the Jim Crow era, all the way to the 50s and 60s, that when you have a group that's oppressed that much, it can make sense how at a certain time, at a certain place, things like affirmative action have a rationale, even though it should not be a long-term goal. Things like affirmative action, at the best, would simply be a means of trying to prop a specific group up to get them out of their, this special situation, circumstances of oppression. What the left needs to do is ask why these things failed. Why did the civil rights movement fail, for the most part, to lift black people out of poverty? While at the same time, the left should not ignore the question of why was the civil rights movement extremely effective at moving a minority, but a sizable minority of black people out of poverty. And the answers to these questions, and by the way, there's a much larger, well-to-do black middle class today than there would have been without having the civil rights movement. And there are a lot of black people doing much better off because of it, and they really benefited. But I think statistically it's about a quarter, like 25%. So helped a lot of people, but left a lot behind. Identity politics doesn't have an analysis that can lead to anywhere except that we need to have, more identity politics. The reason why black people were left behind is the reason why the working class is left behind. It's because capitalism is failing. That's my radical leftist perspective. It has to do with the invention of computers and the displacement of workers. How do you have a system that's supposed to bring black people out of poverty while at the same time it's an economic system that's failing, that's driving white people into poverty? Again, identity politics cannot answer these questions because it assumes that different groups have different agendas and different needs that demand different solutions. So identity politics cannot grasp the problem of black people being worse than white people, but both black and white people needing the same answer. And the same answer is a system that takes care of everyone. Identity politics just demands that its failed solutions be tried harder and harder and harder. And the worse things get for everyone, the more identity politics will simply demand that white people sacrifice more. Unfortunately, the worse things get for everyone, the more white people will refuse to sacrifice what little they still have left. Well, in the meantime, the social justice warriors will claim that white people are rich and have all this privilege and all this because the people of the ownership class, the top of the ownership class, are white. However, the fact that the very top of the 99, at the very top of the 1%, the top 1% of the 1%, the fact that those people are pretty much almost all white, I guess, really doesn't say much about my situation as someone who is nowhere near there. Just because I'm white, I'm supposed to be lumped in with them. Well, in the world of identity politics, that's true. So what we have here is a failure of the left to put together any political theory, any economic theory, besides demanding equality be forced upon a system that does not produce equality. Capitalism is a class structure. It does not produce equality. Whose fault is it that we have such a failed perspective? Is it the fault of the conservative who's criticizing the idiocy put up by the social justice warriors? Or is it the fault of the left for abandoning true socialism, Marxism, and other ideas that have come past those? I mean, whose fault is it?
By, you not treating these groups equally. Either you have social justice initiatives where you pigeonhole people with labels like black, white, gay, or straight, attempting to correct for perceived injustices, or you treat everybody the same equally with human decency. Those are two very different concepts, and we have to pick one or the other. And considering that I am strongly against group identity politics, and that I really do believe everyone should be treated the same, I am very much in favor of equality. And if you're at all familiar with history or politics, and you're thinking to yourself that a lot of these social justice beliefs sound kind of familiar, well, they should. Social justice is at its very core a Marxist ideology.
Now we get to the fun part. We get to learn about Marxism from someone who doesn't know anything about Marxism, and we get to see someone who so far has been making rational arguments from a certain perspective and just talk about total bullshit. So let's learn about her version of Marxism.
And I know I'm on the right, but I'm not some crazy right-winger accusing everybody of being a dirty commie, even though some of these people, really, they are dirty commies. But this whole story of group identity and oppressor versus oppressed is entirely in keeping with the historical interpretation found in the Communist Manifesto. If you haven't yet read the Communist Manifesto, I really recommend you do. It's a short read. It shouldn't take you longer than about 15 minutes. You can find it for free online, and it'll give you so much insight into how these people think. While Marx lamented about the injustices of the bourgeoisie, the SJWs complained about the patriarchy. They are two sides of the same oppressive coin.
I don't know how stupid something could be. I just got to replay that a couple of times. Let us all let this stupidity sink into us and try to figure out what she's saying.
While Marx lamented about the injustices of the bourgeoisie, the SJWs complained about the patriarchy. They are two sides of the same oppressive coin. While Marx lamented about the injustices of the bourgeoisie, the SJWs complained about the patriarchy. They are two sides of the same oppressive coin. While Marx lamented about the injustices of the bourgeoisie, the SJWs complained about the patriarchy. They are two sides of the same oppressive coin.
Well, looking at two things that are radically different and saying, well, one little aspect of this is kind of like one little aspect of that, therefore they're equal, that's just stupid. You can just conflate any two things you want that way. So why don't I just conflate Marxism with the American Revolution? Well, Marx was lamenting about the oppression of the bourgeoisie. In the American Revolution, they were lamenting about the oppression of the British. See, they're the same thing. George Washington was a Marxist. Obviously.
Of course, what these similarities mean is that the same arguments of liberty and individualism that can be used to debunk the Marxist worldview
and forcing people to work, 16-hour days during the Industrial Revolution, that's not liberty. That's class oppression. And you don't know anything about Marx. You don't know anything about Marxism. You probably have not read the Communist Manifesto. It takes a little more than 15 minutes to read. It's not even a mature vision of Marx. You said absolutely nothing about Marx whatsoever. I don't know where this comes from, that these conservatives who are against social justice warriors will continuously throw Marxism at people about how they're against Marxism, how this all came from Marx, when obviously you don't know anything about Marx. You're not even mentioning anything about Marx beyond his name, and just claiming this is Marxism. Read the book, The Communist Manifesto. You haven't read it. Hypothetically, even if you've read anything in the Communist Manifesto, you didn't really read it. I mean, reading something means you take the fucking book and you read through it and you try to think, what is he saying? Why don't I read this? Why don't I digest this? I can critique it, but I actually have to try to consciously interpret it in some level. I can't just pick it up and say, well, here's a sentence that sounds like I can conflate it with something I don't like, so here, I read the fucking book. Which it really doesn't, I don't really think you've ever read the Communist Manifesto. Maybe I'm wrong, but my point is, even if you read the Communist Manifesto, you never really read it. You never tried to digest it. I don't know. Your arguments at this point are so stupid that, but you're not a stupid person. So this just shows that, when people want to think, they can think, and when people want to be stupid, they can be stupid. That's the bottom line. I'm sure we all do that. We all have our worldview, and when we're in a situation where we can make rational, logical arguments to defend our worldview, we can. And when we can't defend our worldview, we'll just come with some bullshit and pretend that we're doing the same level of critical thinking, even though we're not. So maybe it's not about her. Maybe they just say that this is a statement about the human condition or about how people think in our society in general. But she didn't say anything about Marx to critique, other than that she did not say anything about Marx, and she has no idea what Marxism is.
Can also be used against the social justice worldview. So I hope this video was a helpful deconstruction of what I think are some of the biggest problems with social justice. But before I go, I would just like to say a quick word about Patreon. As I'm sure you're all aware of by now, Patreon has deleted Lauren Southern's account, and I'm not going to go into the reasons why. She's made her own video about that, and if you want to learn more, I suggest you watch it. And in light of that, I have had a lot of people asking me how they can support my channel without using Patreon.
Isn't that great? Fuck Marxism. Give me money. The system doesn't support me. Give me more money. But fuck Marxism. I don't know what class conflict is. Give me money. I need more money. Again, why do we get this? If the system works so well, just can you make some money for yourself? Shouldn't you be a fucking millionaire? I don't know. I don't even really know her economic views. She didn't. I just watched this video, but it always seems that the people who are conservatives, well, they just go ask for money like for anyone else, because, we're all in the same system. We're all fucked by it. Okay, bye. Oh, I'm not asking for any fucking money. I'm not making any fucking money from YouTube. But I guess maybe if I had 113,000 people watching my videos, I would try to make money from it.